Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Tai'Shar Manethrin, a Wheel of Time podcast. I am Will.
I'm Sam.
And we are continuing on in Crown of Swords, the Slog. We're going to be starting off in chapter 4, or chapter 4. Oh, it's
we're going to restart. Chris.
We're going to restart.
You thought that was a slog. We're going to really slog.
We're going to redo it. We're going to try to mine more out of these.
A slog really can be.
Yeah, chapter 24, and Sam's got us. So why don't you kick us off?
Sure. So at the end of the last episode, I spent a fair amount of time telling Will why the chapter about the kin should not be a skip. It should be a read, dang it. When they introduce the kin, it's really important.
Right.
So chapter 24 is called the kin, and I labeled it a hard skip. Oof.
You hypocrite. You.
Oh, man. I read that. I was like, I wrote this, I don't know, weeks ago. And it's like, why did I say that? But then I read through my notes again, like, oh, yeah. Even though the title is the kin, I stand by my hard skip here. The kin are awesome later, just not in chapter 24 of A Crown of Swords.
Yeah.
So, to dive in here, Rihanna watches Elaine and Nynaeve walk away down the street, and she doesn't really know whether to believe them or not when they insist that they're Aes Sedai. And Barrowyn points out that they don't sweat like Aes Sedai, and Rihanna thinks that she would have arranged for word to be sent to the Aes Sedai at the Terrazin Palace, but it would be a mistake if they really are who they say they are. So Barrowyn, I guess, is another one of the kin that I don't even remember at this point.
Yeah.
Says it could be possible. Maybe the older one really is one. We channeled, and what they did was shield the two of them and kick them out on their backsides. That's what they did.
Yep.
If Nynaeve and Elaine were telling the truth, that was perhaps ill-advised. The kin's rules say they can't channel in front of an Aes Sedai, and Rihanna insists we broke no rule. Barrowyn says, rumors mention a girl Amerlin, something Elaine and Nynaeve also mentioned. Rihanna dismisses them as rebels, and who would dare rebel against the White Tower? They'd also heard the rumors about Logain and the Red Aja. Rihanna says to that, it isn't our place to criticize Aes Sedai. Garinia, whatever, says Satel Anan needs to be punished for bringing them here. Rihanna says, remember who she is. If she betrayed us, we'd be crawling on our knees to the White Tower. She would have died in childbirth if not for the kin. So another kin named Serenia comes in and says, Callie is dead. Oh no, who's Callie?
Yeah.
Throat cut, robbed, but it was the one power that did it. So Rihanna thinks, well, no kin would have done that. Aes Sedai can't because of the 3 years. So it's got to be those two scallywags that we've been talking about, obviously.
That's too bad, yes. And then she sings Shine Bright Like a Diamond.
So Nynaeve...
That's just totally random. I'm sorry. I just, I had one last week. I'll have just
at least one a week. At least 1 week. I accept that. Yep, just like Jolene. Mm-hmm. So Nynaeve walks away from the kinfolk, mad as usual. She knew they had a guild, and they had to know where the bowl was. So she looks at Elaine and really doesn't relish the thought of apologizing for wasting a morning since they didn't get anywhere. But Elaine breaks the silence and asks how old Nynaeve thinks Rihanna was. 50, maybe 60? Nynaeve says, why does that matter? Elaine says, how is it possible she aged as much as she has? She says, Nynaeve, who is the oldest accepted that you knew when you were in the tower? And Nynaeve says, Ellen Warrell, a few years older than me. So Elaine, quote unquote, barked a laugh such that Nynaeve wondered whether she had spoken aloud and said Ellen's younger sister came to visit and had gray hair. The woman must be over 40. Somewhere between 20 and 25, Aes Sedai began aging more slowly. So any sister with gray hair is old.
Right.
So if Rihanna slowed, like all one power users do, how on earth old is she? So Nynaeve wants to cry. That's her response to this. She'll never get her gray hair and be taken seriously by the women's circle back in Emmons Field. That's what's really important here.
This comes up a lot in these few chapters where both of these girls are wanting to have gray hair so that they will be taken seriously, which is so interesting. It's so very different from the world we live in.
Yeah, where it's like, get rid of my gray. I don't want to have it.
Right.
I have a friend that's got she's in her 30s and she has gray hair. It's just letting it go gray. And it's a little startling at first, whoa, but it does just sort of underscore you don't have to color your hair. It's okay.
Yeah, I've got a friend, same thing. Her hair is naturally silver gray.
Yeah.
But you only know this if she hasn't dyed it in a little bit and you start seeing her roots come out because it's a stark silver.
Yeah.
And I said, really, you should just let it go.
Totally.
But she was like, nah.
Yeah, it's a thing that, it's not the norm in our culture. I wouldn't say it's unacceptable. It's certainly, people do it and it's fine, but it's not the norm, certainly. So something hits Nynaeve, a glancing blow to the head. She turns around and is expecting Nynaeve to have hit her. So I don't know. But she sees Elaine is in a heap lump rising on the back of her head. So a random woman says, your friend is taken ill. Let me help. And then some dude with a carriage shows up and tries to take Nynaeve's arm and says, hey, I've got a carriage here. Lots of shady folks. She sees an arrow with a blunt stone end, which is enough to make Nynaeve mad. So she channels and all the weirdos double over in pain. Thank you. We don't need any help. She delves Elaine, finds her skull unbroken, thank God, but is too exhausted to do her fancy new 5-power healing method, so she does the normal yellow healing, which makes Elaine thrash, but the bruise on her head goes away and she wakes up. So Nynaeve picks up the arrow. Elaine wonders if it was Tesselyn and Jolene. Nynaeve thanks Rihanna and Garinia. She's still upset about her gray hair, too. Just won't let that go. And says, there's only one way to be sure we'll find the bowl now. We need Matt's Taviran luck. And that only makes Nynaeve cry harder.
Only Matt can find that bowel.
On to chapter 25, Mind Trap, which is a skim, I guess. I don't know. It's okay. Yeah, we get some forsakenness and some weird stuff, but Moghedien is having the same dream over and over again. Halima frees her, sends her to the pit of doom. Shadar Haran leads her to the entrance, and she notices that the stone fangs in the tunnel brush her head while seeming far above Shadar Haran, even though she is right behind him. So she has to crawl to avoid them and then opens out onto the ledge, and the true power washes around her. Shadar Haran puts its boot on her back and shoves her to the ground. The Dark One's voice shouts on her dead, how deep is your failure, Moghedien? The chosen are always the strongest, but you let yourself be captured. You taught those who would oppose me, Moghedien. And Moghedien says, well, I only taught him a little bit. I taught him a way to detect a man channeling that gives them headaches instead. But the great Lord of the Dark is not impressed by this.
This reminds me of in Kung Pao Enter the Fist when he's like, we chained him wrong on purpose as a joke.
And product placement with Taco Bell.
I am bleeding, making me the victor.
Right. Oh, man. Good movie. So then the Dark Lord says, my chosen are always the strongest. My hand moves. So then Shadar Haran pulls a knife, and Moghedien realizes she's bound for a Trollocs cookpot. But instead, the Myrddraal brushes her tongue, then her ear, to get saliva and blood. Pulls out a cage of gold wire and crystal, which is a Kur Suvra. No, not me, Moghedien screams. And Shadar Haran scrapes her saliva and blood onto the Kur Suvra. It's a fun thing to say. Which it then throws over the lake of fire where it stops floating in midair, like you do. And Moghedien begs for mercy. The Great Lord says, you may serve me still. I'm just thinking, it just makes me think of Aladdin for some reason. I don't know. I kind of want a 60 minutes interview with the Dark One. Like, the dude is always just shouting in people's heads. I want more backstory. Like, how did you end up with this gig, man? Like, were you always a screaming demonic volcano, or was this just a job you found on Craigslist? Like, I don't know. But
maybe, yeah, I don't know.
We get some detail about like these minor characters we don't care about. I want more about the demonic volcano. Just call me crazy. I'm curious. Just me. So anyway, Moghedien wakes up on the pallet. She's sleeping on the dream. Starts over again. But then she stirs. Dream starts over. Shadar wakes her up. Moghedien says, I greet you, Miyakova, and means one who owns me. Shadar tells her to close her eyes and not open them again until it says, grabs her by the ear and kind of slings her across the room. And she thinks she's going to slam into the wall of her cell, but doesn't. Suddenly smells wood smoke, and a man says, you may open your eyes. Surprise, it's Moradin. Worst birthday ever. He asks her if she enjoyed her time in the vacuole. So Moghedien thinks that this is a bubble in the pattern, well, outside the pattern, that they can be entered and exited. But once the bubble breaks off, it is gone forever. So Moghedien is not caught on yet that this is one of the Forsaken, for which she can be forgiven because she doesn't know his face. Thinks he's just another dark friend. She says, do you know who I am? He says, yep. Man, I had a good joke here. I can't say it yet. I'm going to save it for the spoiler section. We will come back to that. Still doesn't get it. Moghedien still doesn't get it. Orders Moradin to bring her wine. So he pulls her Kurasuvra out of his shirt on a necklace and kind of strokes it, and she like feels it in her soul. She sees another one on there.
What does that feel like? Like, he's stroking
heartburn.
My soul.
It's like heartburn. I don't know. It's like gas. It's just bad gas. There's another Kusuvra on there. She doesn't know whose. She calls him Miyakova, and he's like, nah, call me Moradin. You're still Moghedien. After all, who can replace you?
I feel like Korsuvra sounds like something that Jabba the Hutt would say to Han Solo.
Sure.
Korsuvra.
That's plausible. Yeah, okay. Gonna rewatch Return of the Jedi now. Been watching
rewatch Kung Pao.
Been watching Empire Strikes Back on repeat ever since my my kids' grandfather gave them a snow speeder, and they wanted to watch the snow speeder. I was like, all right, fine, we'll watch the Hoth scene. They wanted to watch the whole movie. We watched it every Saturday since, which has been okay. I don't know if I was going to pick a Star Wars movie to watch over and over again. Could have picked a worse one. Certainly.
Yeah, it's the best one.
Mm-hmm. I'd say so. Chapter 26, The Irrevocable Words. Hard skip. Yeah, but we are going to talk about this one a lot. I'm telling you, reader, if you would like to skip it, that's my recommendation. We are going to discuss it ad nauseum.
Yes, and yes, there's a lot to unpack here.
There is. But I'll just really quickly summarize it. Whew, unpleasant. It's a Morghese chapter. She's in bed. Brianna brings her something to drink. Morghese snaps and says, I didn't ask you to bring me anything, spills it on the bed. Brianna says, you moan like a sheep. None of your bones are broken. Let it pass and get on with your life. Ooh, man, that's a rough thing to say.
Yeah.
Morghese asks if the men know. Brianna says, no. Talonvor walks in, says, good, you're awake. Something is happening. Basil Gill says, I saw Big Bird land on, not Big Bird. Something like Big Bird land on the roof. A bat? So Min climbed off its back. Talonvor draws through the window, and she sees something fly off a roof. Gotta be Shadow Spawn. Fair guess if you haven't seen the Shan-Chan. Thunder crashes, and she sees fire and thinks, hey, it's the one power, because remember, Morghese can sense the one power, even if she can't channel it. Thunder crashes, and so another swing and a miss there. Talonvor wants to go figure out what's going on. Morghese orders him to stay. Morghese can feel Sidar being used. Someone pounds on the door. It's Shan-Chan. So takes Morghese to the High Lady Saroth, who orders Morghese released. Asks if she's okay. There's a hairless bear there with 6 toes on each paw. A lopar, she learns. Sort of like a cat when it purrs. Saroth tells her that one of the Marath domain used to be an Aes Sedai. Then she has some chick bring Morghese some coffee. Okay, so just a sidebar here. Can you imagine living in a world where coffee is a strange, exotic drink?
Yes.
No, thank you. No, thank you indeed.
Yeah, I love that she's describing coffee and like, oh, this is gross. Which, I mean, if you've never had it, then of course. But
yeah, I mean, Morghese thinks it's yucky because of course she does. It's black coffee. You got to work at it to enjoy black coffee. I mean, you were with me when I learned to like black coffee. We were on a plane to Vienna.
Yeah.
Or wherever. Yeah, I think it was Vienna. And I just thought that the stewardess was an attractive young lady, so I kept asking her to bring me coffee.
Right.
And I learned to drink black coffee. And it was like instant black coffee too. It was yucky, but ever since then I've drank black coffee. I don't know. It's powerful motivator. Doesn't even offer her any Coffee Mate or anything. International Delight. Some cream and sugar for the poor lady. Geez, something.
Yeah. You can't start her off with black coffee.
Yeah, I think in 8th grade I started off with like the instant cappuccino mix. In the tin, a little tin.
Yeah, I remember
something. And that was pretty delicious. But no, straight to the black coffee. Good gosh. Suroth gives the usual pitch. Sean Chan descended from Hawkwing, blah blah blah. So, sorry, I keep sidebarring, but I'm going to sidebar one more time. Have you heard of Black BattleTech? Mech Warrior. Okay.
Yeah.
Series of video games back in the day. I understand I've had a bit of a revival in recent years, other formats. There was a ton of lore around them. There were some novels. There was a bunch of Michael Stackpole novels. The whole Sean Chan thing really reminds me of the clans from BattleTech. They were this group of like warlike folks who were returning to the quote unquote inner sphere. I just think of like, the solar system, claiming to be descendants of Alexander Kerensky. And all the worlds, as a result, belong to them by right, which is just it makes me think of Arthur Hawkwing. And anyway, this sort of thing has been done over and over again. I know there's probably a TV tropes here, I imagine, but it just makes me think of BattleTech, of Mech Warrior 2 specifically. Anyway, Clan Jade Falcon.
I played the BattleTech PC game that was on a single 3.5 floppy.
Nice.
Yeah, like way back in the day, and I loved that game. It was so janky, but
heck yeah, man! It's like just a fun concept. You're piloting these giant robots, and they have like machine guns, and they have like missile launchers, and I don't know. It was a fun thing, and just all the lore there. I would love to see those made into a movie someday. That's just a TV show.
Yeah.
Suroth gestures and servants who are sort of naked, wearing sheer clothes. The Dakovel do a dance. Dakovel means person who is owned. So, the Texas comparison ain't wrong. The point of the whole thing is for Morghese to realize that one of them used to be Amathera, Panarch of Terabon. Well, that was unexpected.
Yep.
Suroth says, I sure hope you decide to swear the oath and rule Andor in the name of the princess. May she live forever. We'll talk tomorrow or the next day. I wonder if Suroth ever stubs her toe and goes, son of the Empress, may she live forever. Probably not. She'd probably get beheaded for that or something.
Probably.
The Sean Chan don't really seem to have much sense of humor.
They don't.
Morghese is escorted back to her quarters and sort of considers jumping off the balcony for reasons we'll discuss in a minute to remove Suroth's leverage also. Instead, she says the magic words that make Elaine queen because that's the way it works. No one else has to hear it. She just says it. Elaine sees what she was thinking and grabs her arm, hauls her back away from the window so she won't jump. Brianna and Lenny start yelling at each other until Talanvor, etc., come in, including Sebin Balwer, who shows up and says he has a way to smuggle Queenie out of the Fortress of the Light. The guards at the door have had accidents, so they pack up, and as they are riding out of Amador, Morghese smiles sadly, and Lenny asks why. Morghese says there's a long road ahead yet. So, the thing I've kind of glossed over here is the rape scene. I didn't even mention it, but let's discuss that now.
Well, okay. The first thing I have to say about it is that on my first reading, did not catch it at all.
I said scene. I should say like a couple of like throwaway lines, maybe even one line. It's certainly not a scene, for which we thank you, Robert Jordan, for not giving us a scene.
For sure. Yeah. And I mean, and part of the reason why I for sure read this, and I think the reason why it didn't exactly connect for me is that it's so out of the character of these books in a lot of ways.
Anything that unpleasant. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's just not something that and like I mentioned grimdark last episode. That's more of a grimdark thing. And Robert Jordan just tends to not go there.
Right. Know? Yeah. And it's also it's kind of a strange thing to kind of just throw out there. I don't want to act like that you can't have these kinds of unpleasant things in a narrative, because it can serve a purpose, and of course it's a real thing that happens to people and a very serious thing. And I know whenever you have it in a narrative, you want to treat it in the right way and everything. And I don't think that I don't feel like here that it's at all disrespectful, but but it's still an odd kind of insert or an odd kind of extra thing that like I said, my first time through, wasn't even aware of it.
Yeah, sure.
I started discussing it online with people, and folks were kind of talking about the content of it when like questions of, hey, how old should my kid be before they read it?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And this was one of the things that came up, and I'm like, really?
Yeah, like that's just like such a throwaway. Like there's a later scene we will discuss in this episode that is more substantive in that way, but this is like literally, I didn't even have his name in there, Iman Valda. I literally Googled more gays raped by, and Iman Valda popped up. Like, Google, wow, that's impressive. It was a Reddit thread, but it says raped twice, once by Ravine and again by Iman Valda, which fair enough, you know.
Okay,
we touched on that, how compulsion certainly played a factor in that.
Well, yeah, and I mean that is implied, but not. I mean, this is explicit.
This is directly referenced. I don't have the exact line in front of me, but. You know, Iman Valda basically said, I will stop having the questioners torture you if you will come to my bedroom, basically. Yeah.
So, yeah.
And it's like, oh, man.
I got accused of spoiling it by saying that I just feel like this plot goes nowhere. But I feel like this plot goes nowhere.
Yeah, right. This is a good example of that.
This just adds to the frustration about that. The why of it. It
really is questionable. Like, what was the purpose of including that detail compared to the fact that you don't get that kind of thing happening anywhere else almost, you know? Just in this book, really, you know, like it doesn't happen in a lot of other books.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot to say about some more this later on, but because there's something to compare it to in a bit, which if you've read a few chapters further, then you already know,
what we're talking about. And it's not a spoiler because it's in this book.
It's in this book.
But we'll get there,
We'll get there.
Fortunately, Robert Jordan didn't have back-to-back rapes.
Right.
Then he'd be, I don't know, George R. R. Martin or something. But.
Yeah. All right.
Chapter 27, To Be Alone. We'll call this a skim because it's a Perrin chapter. We like Perrin. Yeah. So Perrin leaves his room. Servants are stepping wide of him because Rand threw him across the Grand Hall of the Sun with the One Power recently. Everyone's like, why are you still here, bro?
Take a hint.
Get out. They were fighting over what Rand was going to do with the Aes Sedai. After which Rand kicked Perrin out of Cairhien. So Perrin turns a corner and nearly runs into Loyal, who has his stuff packed up. He's going with an Ashaman named Carlden to visit all the steading and waygates. Loyal doesn't like that Rand is chasing Perrin away, or the fact that exactly, he doesn't want to be sent to all over the place. Perrin's like, good luck, we'll meet again someday. Can't go with you, though, old chap. With that, they part ways. Perrin heads to the stable to get Stepper, rides out of Cairhien to meet up with Aram, Fail, and the Gain. Bane and Shiad are there, along with a bunch of maidens this time. Sulin randomly. Okay, sure. Sulin's in Perrin's entourage now, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, this is all part of the slog where it's like, it does feel like, what do I do with this character?
Yeah, sure. And Sulin's a great character, but it's right. Like, so why did she go with Perrin? Okay, fine. Whatever. There's no reason not to if there's a bunch of other maidens, but whatever.
Yeah.
Excuse to keep her around and have her be involved in things. Solanda and Camille and more Kyrianan ladies wearing men's clothes and swords. Fael has taken them under her wing, promises she won't let them get under your feet. Perrin does what Perrin always does when he doesn't like something Fael is doing. He sighs and scratches his beard. Time to go before someone decides to take Perrin's head as a favor to the Dragon Reborn, which when someone suggests it, causes Aram to growl like a dog. So Jur Grady and Fager Niall join him along with the Two Rivers men. And Perrin's entourage continues to grow. 6 Aes Sedai plus 2 of Rand's allegedly tame Aes Sedai, Masuri and Sionid. One of the Ashaman makes a gateway into a less hilly area that seems hotter. Gaul runs up and mutters that women are beyond belief. Perrin asks Grady if he has a wife. Sora, she misses me, but I wish I knew why her knee hurts. Do I know? Apparently, the Ashaman have discovered their own version of the Warder Bond, Perrin learns. An Ashaman named Candler worked it out. A man likes to know his wife's safe. So, fair enough. Everybody.
Yeah, I've been wondering about my wife's safety for a long time.
Oh, man. I hear you. I thought mine had COVID today, but I don't think so.
Well, I haven't met mine yet, so at least not that I know of.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody is through the gateway, and Perrin wants it closed, but nope, we've got to keep doing this nonsense. So here comes Berelain and her retinue. Ugh. Everybody mounts up, and Perrin reins in to give his speech. As far as everyone knows, I've been banished. The first of Mayen is on her way home, and the rest of you disappeared like fog in the sun. Everybody laughs. Perrin the comedian.
Oh, good one. Yeah. Good one. Yeah, golden eyes. He'll be here all week.
Right. Some of you may be wondering where we are and why. Yes, Perrin. Yes, we sort of are. This is Gildan. They've crossed 1,500 miles in a step. Gateways are weird to them and us. We have to convince Queen Oleander we aren't here to invade. Then they're going to find Massima, charming fellow we haven't seen in a while. The prophet has been causing some problems, but we're going to let him know Rand doesn't want everyone frightened into following him. We'll take Massima and his people back to the Lord Dragon. Everyone cheers now. Perrin prays everything goes smoothly and quickly so he can get the heck away from Berelain. We all want that too, Perrin.
Right.
It was about time his being Taviran showed itself good for something. Ask Matt how that's working out for him.
Really, it hasn't worked out for any of the boys.
No. Chapter 28, Bread and Cheese. You can judge from the title of this chapter that I'm going to say skip.
I don't know. I'm feeling a little hungry.
I'm like just a good wedge of cheese and a hard loaf of bread. I can see it. Fair enough. I'm all about it. So Matt, perspective. Matt knew he was in trouble the minute he moved into the Terrazin Palace. Before he left the Wandering Woman, he went to tell Mistress Anan. She says, "You squeeze too many melons, my young lord, and you shouldn't be surprised when a rotten one breaks in your hand, or two." Okay, some weird mixed metaphors there. Maybe just the wrong choice of imagery in the first place. I'm just going to leave that one alone.
Just move on.
Mistress Anan makes him promise not to say a word about it, though Matt hasn't the faintest idea what she's talking about. His new rooms in the palace are nice, though. A sitting room, a sulking room, and a huge bedchamber with the biggest bed he's ever seen. There's a servant's room for Niram off to one side, and a clock on the marble mantle over a fireplace in the sitting room. The dice in his head stopped spinning when Elaine mentioned them, a curiosity. He'd heard a saying back home, men teach cats curiosity, but cats keep sense for themselves. I'm no bloody cat. Matt mutters to himself, and Tylon says, "Of course you're not a cat. You're a succulent little duckling is what you are." Outraged at being called a duckling, Matt manages a bow and starts to thank her, but she advances across the room, humming a tune he's hummed to a few girls. I will steal your breath with kisses. Matt laughs nervously and tries to get a chair between them, but she's faster, pushes him into it, sits on his lap, and kisses him. He tries to stop her, protesting that someone will come in, and she laughs. He claims to be engaged to a girl back home, and she really laughs at that. Someone knocks at the door, and Matt shouts, squeaks, as Robert Jordan puts it. Who is it? Tom sticks his head in just as the queen gets off his lap and 3 paces away very quickly. Matt goes to stand and realizes she's managed to undo his pants. Tom says, welcomed with open arms by the queen herself after she leaves, and Julian becomes very interested in his cap. They ready themselves for a trip to the Rahad, and Matt stops by to check on Oliver, who has serving girls all around him, as he often does. Kind of like Podrick. I think of Podrick, like a younger Podrick from Wheel of Time, or from Game of Thrones. Finally, the Wonder Girls come back in. Matt asks, where have you been? And Elaine says, went for a walk. And Nynaeve says, had tea with some women your innkeeper knows. And we know the truth. Yep. Matt says from now on, you'll have 2 red-armed bodyguards at all time, expecting a fight from them. And Elaine says, that's a wonderful idea. You were right about that. And Nynaeve nods enthusiastically because we know that they were shot by a stone-tipped arrow, like Hawkeye style. Like, I just imagine, like, I've never even seen this before. Like, like an arrow with a stone on the front. Like, imagine like a fist or something. Like, yeah. Anyway, Hawkeye or Green Arrow or whatever. Next thing Matt knows, he's at an inn with Julian, who is sipping some drink from a yellow fruit grown in the countryside. What could that possibly be? Mm-hmm. And Elysian, the Wonder Girls told them to be Taviran across from a dilapidated-looking house. Nothing happens all day, and back in his rooms, he has a note. My little rabbit, I expect to have you for dinner tonight in my apartments. Ugh. There's a red painted iron lock in the hallway, so Matt locks himself in and skips dinner. But just before he goes to bed, the door rattles and a woman's voice laughs. So Matt goes back to the same bench to watch the house for 2 more days. Nothing happens. But he eats 5 bowls of oyster stew, even though it has bits of shell in it. Guess he's kind of hungry from skipping dinner. Becomes closer friends with Birgitta, which surprises him. She's just kind of like one of the guys, which, this whole like it's just like, this is Matt like learning that there are other relationships to be had with women, I guess. Right. Trying to dawdle them on their knee. It's like the juxtaposition between Tylan and Birgitta, I guess. Right, yeah. Is a thing. Tylan leaves him another note, and Matt's getting nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. Tries to get some food in the kitchen, and a cook says, the queen will feast on roast ducklings soon enough, lad. So he starts getting food when he's out of town and bringing it back to his room. On the 3rd morning, the dice are rolling in his head again. So, chapter 29, the Festival of Birds. We're going to say read half and skip half. Or read all of it. I don't know. Yeah. We're going to talk about it, and then you can make your decision if you haven't read it.
It's an important chapter, but yeah, it's weird. Like, yeah, yes. I don't know. We're going to talk a lot about it, so you may want to read it regardless.
Yeah. So Matt has got this plan to use Oliver as a shield against Tylan. He's going to go get Oliver. Like, all right, I'm going to take him to the Festival of Birds, where you dress up. So he goes to get Oliver. He comes back to his room. Tylan is there in his room, and along with a scantily clad woman named Rizal, who offers to take Oliver to the festival instead of Matt. And and Oliver is, of course, on board with that. And just like that, Matt is locked in his bedroom with Tylan. Whoops. Oh, man. This is all around violent. Yeah, so let's just go ahead and have this discussion now. This is a rape scene. Yeah. Yeah, there's no 2 ways about it. I mean...
Well, and what's funny, my first time through, I didn't think of it that way. I really didn't. Yeah. I was like, oh, this is just a funny little... And, right. And but the more I thought about it and tried to like say, oh, no, that's not... I was like, no, that's exactly what it is. And the fact that it's kind of played for comedy is almost more bothersome.
Yes, this has not aged well. I mean, okay, sure. Let's acknowledge it is a woman who is forcing a man, and that is not your usual situation. But also, she has a knife,
right?
And she like shoves him across the room with a knife against his throat on his tiptoes, and he says over and over again, "You can't do this." And she says, "Watch and learn, my kitten." So so it's implied Matt enjoyed himself. But that ain't the point, is it? The lady forced him literally at knife point to do the deed. I mean, that's rape. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And I guess it's kind of interesting. I've had this discussion about this with other folks, where when this kind of thing shows up in a story and it's played more for laughs, it kind of shows, okay, this was written 15, 20 years ago now.
Yeah.
I know we've become more aware of problems in our world, maybe that we weren't willing to admit before. One of the things that I guess contributes to, if you're going to call it this, rape culture, is the idea that men basically can't be raped. I'm curious to see if they end up doing something with this in the show, if this is one of the things that gets cut out. It easily could be, honestly.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I can see them wanting to address it somehow, but also, I mean, because it's in some ways important to Matt's development as a character. I think Robert, it's so many times Robert Jordan, I feel had his head in the right place. Maybe he was trying to change Matt's view of women and make him respect them more, but he went too far. Went too far in this case. No doubt about it. And so I can see them wanting to make sure that development of the character happens. I think it's important that Matt starts out as a womanizer, in the way he is, and has that character development happen. I think that's key. I just maybe think that this isn't quite the way to go about it.
Yeah.
There's something different that needs to happen here. I don't know if there's a way they can do this in a way that's not the way it is, that isn't rape, but
yeah, I think when I was trying to in my head say, okay, well this isn't a rape, and trying to act like, okay, it's not that this kind of content isn't in the Wheel of Time.
Sure.
I think one of the things that makes you kind of feel that way is Matt sticks around after this. I mean,
right.
And in theory, it's okay because he's taking care of the girls and he's doing this and he's doing that.
Yeah,
and he's a good guy. He's Tavir, and maybe he couldn't actually get out. But I'm and eventually I was like, you know what? That doesn't even matter. I mean, it's kind of victim blaming to act like, well, why didn't you leave the situation?
Right. Yeah, and it's we're made to think that he sort of grew to enjoy it, and that's fine. I mean, that's possibly fair, but it doesn't change the fact that this initial encounter is rape.
Sure. Right.
Whether or not his feelings about Tylen changed, he says later, maybe the next time we meet, I'll do the chasing, and that's fine, but it doesn't change the fact that it's rape.
Right. Yeah. And to me, it's tonally odd to have what you can see Morgaze and the way that her scene is handled. It's very subtle.
Yeah.
It's
off
very
screen, completely. It's just a throwaway line or two, really.
But at the same time, it's also very clear that she is in just a terrible place after this.
Right. Whereas Matt just sort of shakes it off, kind of.
Right. That, I guess that's part of the reason why.
Problematic.
Yeah.
Really it's not good. It's not a good portrayal.
Right. He should probably be a little more affected by it. And that's where it's it's kind of strange because now
he acts just embarrassed or upset, but not really traumatized. And I get it, the fact that he, it's implied he enjoyed himself, etc. But it just doesn't change the fact that he was coerced at knife point, literally at knife point.
Right. Yeah, it would be different if, and the way that I would prefer for them to portray it in the show is if she just kind of wears him down and he's
or if he finds her attractive but doesn't just think, oh, she's queen, and it just and it happens organically. All right, that's fine. That's one thing. But the problem is when she pulls a knife,
right,
and puts it against his throat and says, and pushes him across the room and cuts his clothes off or whatever. Like that is the problem.
Yeah, because up to that point, there is kind of a funny and I'll even say somewhat important character element to him being pursued in the way that he normally pursues women.
I agree.
For that reason, I hope they include this somewhat.
Yeah, no, I agree.
But this particular scene and the way it comes off, it's very odd. It doesn't, the follow up to it doesn't feel real. Matt, he doesn't seem affected quite the way that it seems like somebody who had been through that would be affected.
Right.
It's problematic.
And I want to say for listeners, if you disagree with us, I would love to hear an argument about why this isn't rape. If you really are surprised at us saying that this is rape, please explain your thought process, because to me it just really comes across that way. My thing is, if the situation was reversed and Matt had Tylen had a knife to Tylen's throat, it would unambiguously be rape. So let's just leave it there. Like, obviously it's rape.
And it wouldn't be funny at all.
Right. It doesn't matter if he was making the same jokes or whatever. It would just be rape.
Right. Yeah. And so, I mean, that's where it's like, it's kind of strange, because I don't know. And maybe somebody might hear and agree with us, but disagree with, kind of what we're saying about the strangeness of it. Maybe you think this was handled well in a way that is somehow pointing out the flaws that we're talking about. I just feel like it doesn't quite play right in a way that makes it clear that we're not supposed to be okay with this.
Right.
And, or that Matt's not okay with this.
Yeah. I mean, like, both Tylen and Besselin say, oh, it's just Ibudari culture.
Right.
Okay. So is acceptable in your culture? Like, what?
And I mean, if it is, that's a very interesting and tragic thing that needs to be discussed at least a little bit more.
But it's just a couple of throwaway lines.
Right. Yeah.
And it's just this quirky, like, oh, your car culture is different from yours. Like, what?
Yeah.
No, that's not okay.
Yeah. And I mean, like, you feel like at some point Matt would have brought this up with Tom or somebody and been like, hey, this thing happened and I don't know how to feel about it.
Yeah. And I mean, okay, Jordan sets the scene a little bit ahead of time with discussing how Ibudari women with their marriage knife can kill their husband and whenever they want, essentially.
Right.
Like, okay, that's already messed up.
Right.
Let's just admit that's just really messed up.
Right.
And again, it's like, Jordan trying to subvert tropes and like reverse, typical patriarchal culture. And I get that. Sure. But it's just ham-fisted in its execution, really, in that sense.
I mean, the idea of a culture where, women essentially are presumed innocent when they kill their husband, that's an interesting idea. And it was more interesting, just like an interesting idea, when it was kind of a throwaway, like, this is part of their culture. Okay, well, that's crazy. Yeah, then you get into it here a little bit, but you don't actually explore it, I guess, in a way that like how this affects men, how this affects
just a couple throwaway lines. Yeah. Right.
And so it's, in a lot of ways, it's not my problem that it's included. It is just the handling of it.
Yeah, I'm with you. So anybody, if you have thoughts on this, we would love to hear them. This is something we're happy to discuss further if it warrants it from our listenership.
And I mean, this is a somewhat well-trod path from what I understand in the fandom. A lot of people have talked about this and had a bit of a debate over whether or not.
Yeah, I thought about looking up Reddit threads on it, and just thought, I won't.
Yeah,
but
nah. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing satisfying on Reddit. Let's just admit it.
Generally, that's true.
I'm glad to pause to talk about it here, because I think the first time I read it through, I'm kind of upset with how much I just kind of like, oh, okay, well, that's reversing some roles here but it's like you're saying, it's the knife.
Right. That's pretty clear cut. The knife really makes it clear cut.
And because I think the first time I read it through, I did picture her having a knife, but I was thinking, I was picturing the way Matt was saying, oh, you don't mean it. It's not decent, as more like, I'm into it, but I'm from a conservative type village, and you know,
You're right.
I've got to play it cool. But I went back and read it multiple times since then because of having these discussions, and I'm like, I can't act like this is just a like, oh, ha 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 kind of thing,
right?
The way it's written.
Yeah, I'm with you. Well, okay. So the second half of this chapter is actually pretty good. So, you know, that part, feel free to skip. We've talked about it. You know what you're getting yourself into. Skip to the part where Matt meets up with Brigitte and Elysian. Brigitte's dress is quite revealing, and she says, sometimes it's fun to be looked at, pokes Matt in the ribs, and asks him, what kept you, a pretty girl? And Matt prays he isn't blushing, just contributing to our
Right.
Beslin shows up with a bunch of his friends. Great, just what Matt wants. The son of the predatory queen, hanging around as a reminder. So it's around noon, but there are tons of people in the streets celebrating. Beslin says this usually happens indoors, but it's so dang hot. People are partying outside this year. So Brigitte and Elysian are giving money to the poor folks and urchins. Beslin stops Elysian at one point and says, forgive me, Tyron, but not him. No brass ring on his little finger. He's not in the guild. Matt asks why someone can't even beg in this city without being in a guild. And then the beggar jumps at him with a knife. So sudden dark friend beggar attack. Switch things up a little bit.
Yeah, got to be a little different.
Yeah, so Matt and Brigitte are fighting back to back until a bunch of other beggars swarm the dark friends. And Beslin says, let the Fellowship of Alms finish its business. I like that. The guilds won't leave any of these interlopers alive. And then back to the Rose, which is that inn across from the dilapidated house. They're watching again. And Beslin casually says, I think you will be good for my mother, Matt. And Matt chokes and sprays tea into the crowd. And Beslin says, why? Her choosing you for her pretty, of course. Why are you angry? Oh, I forget you're an outlander. She's my mother, not my wife. Now there's a thing to say. Father died 10 years ago, and she has always claimed to be too busy. I'm just glad she chose someone I like. Where are you going? And as Matt storms off. And Matt's like, I need to clear my head, but you're drinking tea. If I'm not back by tomorrow, tell them they have to find the Bull of the Winds themselves. So Matt thinks all of Ibudar is mad, and I think we're inclined to agree with you, Mr. Cawthon.
Yeah, and again, just all of this kind of played light for laughs. Like, I mean, we're chuckling at it here. I mean, that's the way it's written.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's like, oh, wait a minute. I feel icky laughing about it. But yeah,
right.
It's definitely the way it's written. Yeah, exactly. So switch to Rihanna, who is watching Solane disappear down the street, and a fellow in a bronze coat is following her. She looks at 12 women seated around her and says, I think we should move everyone who does not wear the red belt to the farm for a little while. They don't disagree. They are elders, but she is eldest, and that they are like Aes Sedai. At least they think they are. So that brings us to the end of the chapter. I did have one spoiler. I don't know. It was more of a joke that I didn't want to. It was a spoiler joke.
Spoiler warning. Spoiler warning. If you don't want to be spoiled, go ahead and leave now. I don't think this is much of a spoiler, to be honest.
No, it's not. Yeah, but yeah, we've talked about how it's not a spoiler. But back when Moghedien walks out of the bubble, the vacuole, and thinks she's talking to a dark friend. She says, do you have any idea who I am? And he says, yep, call me Ishmael. I mean, Moradin. So there, that's my little joke.
Yeah.
It's a spoiler, sort of.
Which, okay, when you're spun back out into the pattern, the Dark Lord gives you a new name. Right. Do you not have a hard time like adapting to that? Like,
you would think so.
I would just think if somebody randomly says, hey, your name is Chuck from now on, then I would be like, oh, my name's Will. Oh, it's Chuck now. I forgot.
Chuck, but you can call me Will for short.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, there's that, and then also having different plumbing, but the name thing.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. Oh man,
no, that's a fair point. That is a fair point, though. I mean, you'd have to be kind of concentrating on that a lot. Be like, I'm Arengar now, not Chuck.
Right.
Whatever.
Yeah, it's. I don't know. I'd be curious to see how they handle the spinning back out in the pattern. We talked about it last time,
right?
And I mean, like, the keeping Arengar and Osengar so that they can
like maybe just Arengar. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, like, you know, even Osengar, like, I don't know how well Rand saw him when he fought him. So, like, you could almost, you know, and I think he was really old because they were close to the outside of
the Boar, the Dark One's prison.
Yeah, so like you could, so almost Osengar doesn't, like, you could almost age him up to be whatever one, Balthamel, whatever one it is.
Yeah.
But I think, like, if you just did Arengar that way, where she became a woman, then that would be fine.
Yeah, I mean, one way to handle all of the folks that are reborn
except the fact that Rand runs into Moradin at the end of this book when he's fighting Samael.
Yeah.
Unless you I don't know, unless you just didn't do that, maybe.
Well, you could not do that, or you could just be like, hey, when he fought him as Baelzamon, he looked pretty different then. I mean, that would be
fire in his eyes anymore. Yeah.
Right.
Touché.
Yeah, I mean, or you
now
could
just Billy Zane. I don't know.
Yeah, you could just straight up have Rand recognize him there.
Right, and just be like, what? That's not
change.
Yeah,
change the dynamic a bit. I mean,
sure. Oh, that's true. That was like, yeah, that did seem weird.
Well, because moving forward, so there's scenes coming up in future books where he's meets up with Moradin, and to me it is not at all clear that it's Moradin when he's talking to him, because it's Rand perspective, and he's like, and I saw a man who with a beard who could channel, and the first time that's mentioned, I was like, is this a new character? Who is this?
Yeah, it's just like Robert Jordan couldn't resist having that foil between Ishmael and Rand, like that he had in the early books, and then he's like, well, crud, I killed him off. Oh wait, I can spin him back out and have him
well, and I'm fine with that. I feel like the whole, like, keeping him a secret who he is doesn't serve the plot. It just makes it confusing.
Not at all. Because it was such a secret early on, you almost thought he was the Dark One. And once it was revealed, it's like, well, it's been revealed. Why are we redoing this? Why are we retreading the same ground? It's just like Colivir, just the same type of thing.
And there's a point later on where he and Moradin both bail fire at the same time at something, and
they cross the streams. Yep.
Right. And so they're like connected from then on out, and they have like shared, they have shared dreams and everything.
Kind of a Voldemort thing.
Right. And I mean, like, all of that would be so much easier to understand.
And I don't think I even realized that was what happened there. Like, we'll talk about it later, but yeah, I don't think I realized that was why they're connected again. I just sort of thought it was like, well, Ishmael and Rand were connected before, so sure, why not now?
Sure, yeah, he's nameless, whatever.
Dang it, Cadsuane told you not to do that, man.
Yeah,
told you to stop bail firing. You did it anyway.
Oh man, I'm so excited to have Cadsuane, and she's such it. When you get to know her, and you're like, oh, she's like, she has to be. She is the only Aes Sedai that can be a suitable advisor for Rand.
Yeah.
Because she's such a powerful and imposing character, and she doesn't put up with crap from nobody. And so, yeah, I'm excited to have her back in. All right. Well, thanks as always for listening. You can contact us at tsmpodcast.com. You got a contact form there. Fill it out. Let us know what you think of this show. We have a lot that that we talked about here that we'd be glad to hear from you about. There's clearly some strong opinions out there. Wherever you get your podcast, go leave us a rating and a review. Share us with your friends who are into the Wheel of Time, or even people who aren't aren't, if you want to just, make them uncomfortable. And, whatever, we'll take it. Of course, you can always reach out to us on our socials at Podcast TSM, Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. Even if it's something short, guys, if you're just like, comment something, hey guys, I listened to this week's episode and falafel or something. I don't know. It makes our day. So anyway, next week we will be continuing through our slog through the Count of Swords. So join us next time. And until then, Tai'Shar Manetheren.